What's up, everybody? Michael F. Florio from NFL Fantasy here, and there's just been so much happening in the NFL lately. A lot of players returning to teams, some will be playing somewhere else this year, and I'm going to break it down and tell you what it all means for fantasy football heading into the 2021 season. And I have to start with the biggest story in the NFL right now. Dak Prescott is returning to Dallas. Him and the Cowboys have agreed on a 4-year, $160 million contract, and Dak will earn $75 million in 2021, the most in the NFL. And I am really excited for this move because last season, in the first 5 weeks of the year, when Dak Prescott was healthy, he led the NFL in passing yards, yards per game, pass attempts per game, and he was averaging over 27 fantasy points per game. I thought he could have put up an MVP caliber season, and I expected big video game numbers out of this offense. But once that got hurt, that put an end to it all. I expect him to bounce back fully this year. I would draft him in the 6th round, but he is my QB4 in my early quarterback rankings, so you can see that I'm really high on him, but I'm also high on his weapons, and that leads to the question, which wide receiver should you draft first there between Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb? And I think a lot of people would lean Amari Cooper, the proven veteran, but not me. Give me the youngster in CeeDee Lamb. I am so excited for this kid and what his future is in this offense. I would take him. I think he's going to start to go in the 5th round, but I would draft him in the 4th round of my drafts because you look at what he did last year with Dak Prescott in those first 5 weeks. He was averaging 8 targets per game and putting up over 17 fantasy points per game. Amari Cooper was also putting up over 17 fantasy points per game, but that was in CeeDee Lamb's first 5 career NFL games without a preseason. I think that he will take over as the Cowboys' #1 wide receiver as early as 2021. So give me him in the 4th round. Another big news going on in the world of football right now. And when is this guy not in the news, right? It's Tom Brady. He has restructured his contract. He's going to be back in Tampa Bay in 2021, as we knew, but he'll also be back next year going forward. So you could feel a little bit better about the pieces around Tom Brady in dynasty leagues or whatever the case may be. But where should you be drafting Tom Brady? That's the question, right? Last year, he finishes the QB12 in fantasy points per game, but that was with 40 passing touchdowns, the second most of his career. He threw for the most passing yards in 5 years, and I know he's proven to us that he can just keep playing for as long as he wants, but he's going to be 44 years old next year, and quarterback is really deep, especially with options who can run, and that is something that Tom Brady simply cannot do. He rushed for 6 yards last year, so for me, I like him as a borderline QB1, maybe a high-end QB2, in about the 10th round. But that was not the only news for the Tampa Bay Bucks this week. They have used their franchise tag on wide receiver Chris Godwin, who is coming off of a down 2020 season for his purposes, but he still did finish as a wide receiver 2 last year. But when you look back to his season 2 years ago, he finished as the wide receiver 2 in 2019, averaging nearly 20 fantasy points per game, almost 100 yards per game. And last season, he was the wide receiver 15 in points per game, and his fantasy points dropped to just under 16 per game, and he was only putting up 70 yards. So he's not quite as good as what he was a couple years ago with all the mouths to feed in this offense, but I do think he could still be the #1 option here since he runs so much out of the slot. And for me, I like him as a 2nd wide receiver on my roster if I could get him in the 4th round. Another wide receiver that is really making waves right now is Allen Robinson. And the Bears used the franchise tag on Allen Robinson, even though he flat out told them he didn't want them to. But I do think the Bears are the best case scenario for Allen Robinson to see 150 plus targets like he has the last 2 seasons there. And hopefully they can upgrade his quarterback position, because even without them doing so, he's been a top 10 wide receiver the last 2 years. I just want to see what he can do in a full season with a really good quarterback. But either way, right now, as long as he's a member of the Bears, and I think he'll get 150 plus targets, I would take him in the 3rd round of my drafts this year. Another big player, but this one did not get a franchise tag, is Aaron Jones, which means he is heading to free agency. And right now in fantasy, I think you have to value Aaron Jones as a late 1st or early 2nd round pick, but his landing spot is obviously going to impact that a lot. He has been a top 10 running back though in 2 straight seasons, but the biggest fantasy complaint for Aaron Jones is how the Packers have used him. Too often they pull him off the field for Jamal Williams, or they'll have him split work with Williams or something like that. He could potentially end up in a scenario this upcoming season where they will just set him free and give him 18 plus touches a game. I think a team like Miami would be pretty close to his production with what he's given us with Green Bay. But I think if he signs somewhere like Atlanta, that could take him to a new level, as they have a coach now who has built the dominant run game that we've seen in Tennessee the last couple of years, and he is really going to look to give his running back the ball a bunch. And if Aaron Jones leaves Green Bay, someone has to step up, and everything points to it being A.J. Dillon. They drafted him last year to be the heir apparent to Aaron Jones if he was to leave this season. And if that is the case, A.J. Dillon is going to come with a lot of hype in fantasy. Some people already compare his running style to Derrick Henry or J.K. Dobbins, so there's already a lot of high praise there. My concern, though, is how utilized will he be in the passing game? That is something he really didn't do at all as a rookie. And if Aaron Jones leaves, I anticipate that they will bring back Jamal Williams. And we know Green Bay loves that he can pass protect and his pass catching abilities. That is my big concern. And because of that, I would advocate to take him in the 4th or 5th round of fantasy drafts. But just know that he's going to get hyped up, and it may cost you a little bit more to get him on your fantasy roster this season. That is going to do it for us now. But if you want more information with the NFL free agency and the NFL draft coming up, make sure to download our NFL Fantasy Football podcast. You can get it at nfl.com/podcast or your favorite podcast provider, and it runs year round. So we have you covered whenever there's any NFL news, and we'll see you next time.